All right, today we're jumping into a really radical idea, a vision to completely tear down and rebuild a government from scratch. So let's get into it. At the very core of this whole thing is a pretty provocative question. What if the answer to corruption isn't just, better laws or better people, but a totally different way of running things? Could a modern kingdom actually succeed where democracy has sometimes struggled?
And this quote right here, this is what started it all. It captures this raw feeling of frustration, this idea that the whole election process is just a joke, and that maybe, just maybe, the answer is something as wild as a permanent monarchy. So where did this even come from?
Okay, first up, let's unpack that initial, really bold idea. This whole vision was designed for Somaliland, and it starts by trying to figure out what the root problems really are.
So the starting point is a pretty harsh diagnosis of the situation. It talks about a system that's just paralyzed by this endless appetite for corruption, and it basically calls elections a sham that just goes in circles without ever getting anything done.
So, when that's your starting point, what do? Well, the first thought presented here is to just sidestep all that political mess entirely. And the proposed solution? A permanent monarchy, seen as a way to finally get some stability and actually deliver on big, long-term projects for the country.
In this line, this just perfectly sums up the thinking behind that initial idea. The whole assumption is that if a leader doesn't have to constantly worry about getting reelected, they're basically immune to all the short-term deals and money that can mess up politics. It's a pretty fascinating and definitely controversial idea.
But here's where it gets really interesting. That raw idea of a monarchy doesn't just sit there. It gets polished, refined, and even rebranded into something that sounds a lot more modern and systematic.
You can literally see the pivot happening right here in the language. Monarchy becomes a nonpartisan executive. A king gets rebranded as national stewardship, and the whole idea of one clan ruling is replaced with a system of virtue. This isn't just playing with words, it's a major shift to make a wild idea sound more like a serious, modern plan.
So what in the world is national stewardship? Well, think of it like a leadership council that's totally nonpartisan. Their only job is to focus on long-term goals for the country. The key is to completely separate leadership from the messy cycle of elections, which would hopefully allow for disciplined planning over many years. Okay, so this refined vision, which they're now calling the Kingdom of Transparency, is built on three big ideas, three foundational pillars. Let's break them down.
The first pillar is, honestly, probably the most revolutionary part of this whole thing. It suggests putting women in this central, permanent role as the guardians of the entire system. Their only job would be to ensure accountability, watch every single budget line and project, and act as the final check on power.
There's a line in the proposal that just captures this role perfectly. It's not about having a fancy title, it's about having a constitutional duty to protect the integrity of the state. They're basically the human firewall against any kind of corruption.
All right, pillar number 2 is all about technology. The goal here isn't just to make corruption more difficult, it's to make it structurally impossible. And they plan to do this through something called radical transparency. So here's how it would work, in 3 layers. First, every single government payment or transaction gets recorded on a secure digital ledger, kind of like blockchain. Second, all the budgets are made completely public. Any citizen can see exactly where the money is going at any time. And third, you have an AI constantly auditing everything, automatically flagging anything that looks suspicious. And that brings us to the third pillar, which is really the payoff for all this. Once you've guaranteed stability and transparency with the first 2 pillars, the system can finally pull off a disciplined, long-term economic plan that's designed to bring in some serious foreign investment.
And we are talking about an ambitious plan. The vision is to attract 35 times billion dollars in funds from foreign partners. That money would go to infrastructure, tech, education, all of it managed under the super strict, transparent oversight of this new system.
So, you've got this really complex system. How do you get people on board? How do you make it exciting? Well, you don't present it like a boring policy paper, you turn it into an inspiring, almost cinematic story. And every good story needs a conflict, a problem to solve. This one starts in what it calls the age of failure. It taps into that feeling of being tired of stalled projects and broken promises to make people really want something new.
And then the story gives you a clear, hopeful timeline for how things could change.
A 10-year plan that starts with just restoring basic trust, then moves on to getting global partners, and ends with huge booms in the economy and infrastructure. It's a clear path forward.
And I mean, just listen to this line from the narrative they built. It really captures that epic, transformative feeling they're going for. It's not just about fixing a few things, it's about totally reinventing the country's future.
So when you boil it all down, what's the ultimate argument here? What's the big idea at the very heart of this kingdom of transparency?
Well, the main point is this. Instead of hoping to find virtuous leaders, why not build virtue directly into the system? Make the state itself the thing that guarantees integrity through its transparency, its checks and balances, and its unique structure.
And this is the final takeaway, a really memorable line from the source material. It's this idea that before you can even think about building roads or ports or schools, you first have to build a foundation of absolute unbreakable integrity. That becomes the most important infrastructure you have.
And that leaves us with this final, really thought-provoking question that kind of sums up this whole experiment. It really challenges our usual ideas about power and asks us to imagine a future where leadership isn't about finding the right person, but about designing the right system.